Look closely at a horse. What do you see? To many, they are symbols of luxury or remnants of a bygone era. But look deeper. You are looking at a creature that literally pulled humanity out of the mud and into the modern age. Before the steam engine, before the internal combustion motor, and long before the jet engine, there was a horsepower. But the true mystery isn't in their strength, it's in their heart. In 1973, the world watched a chestnut stallion named Secretariat win the Belmont Stakes by an impossible 31 lengths. He wasn't just running, he was flying. When Secretariat died years later, the veterinarian performed a routine autopsy that turned into a scientific shock. A normal horse heart weighs about 8.5 pounds. Secretariat's heart? It was a staggering 22 pounds. It was perfectly healthy, just massive. It was as if nature had built a biological super-engine. This series isn't a history lesson. It's an investigation into a 55-million-year-old bond. A bond that survived ice ages, the rise and fall of Rome, and the brutal trenches of World War I. We are going to explore how a tiny, multi-toed swamp creature evolved into the golden stallions of the desert that today cost more than a Boeing 737. This is a story of the horse, the accidental survivor that chose us as much as we chose them. If you travel back 55 million years to the Eocene epoch, you wouldn't find a majestic stallion. Instead, scurrying through the humid, tropical jungles of North America, you would find Eohippus, the dawn horse. It was no bigger than a fox terrier. It didn't have hooves. It had 4 padded toes on its front feet and 3 on the back. It was a shy, leaf-eating creature that spent its life hiding from giant, flightless birds and early predators. But the earth began to change. The jungles dried up. The lush canopies vanished, replaced by vast, endless oceans of grass. For most species, this was a death sentence. But for the ancestor of the horse, it was an opportunity. Over millions of years, the dawn horse underwent one of the most radical transformations in the history of evolution. To survive the open plains, they needed speed. Their legs grew longer. Their middle toe began to thicken and harden, eventually absorbing the other toes to become a single, solid hoof, the ultimate high-performance shock absorber. Their teeth changed to grind tough, silica-rich grass. Most importantly, their eyes migrated to the sides of their skull. This gave them a 350-degree panoramic view, allowing them to see a predator creeping up from behind while they were still grazing. They developed a flight response, a nervous system wired like a hair trigger. To a horse, a rustling leaf isn't a breeze. It's a mountain lion. This extreme sensitivity, which makes them spooky today, is exactly what kept them alive when the rest of the prehistoric world was dying out. Here is a fact that escapes most history books. Horses actually went extinct in the Americas. Around 10,000 years ago, at the end of the last ice age, the horse vanished from the very continent where it evolved. Whether it was climate change or overhunting by early humans, the American horse was gone. Fortunately, before the land bridges vanished under rising sea levels, small bands of these creatures had already crossed into Asia and Europe. For thousands of years, they were simply prey. Early cave paintings in Lascaux, France, show horses not as mounts, but as targets for spears. Humans hunted them for meat and hide. They were the wild cattle of the ancient world. But around 3500 BC, on the freezing, windswept steppes of Kazakhstan, a group of people known as the Burtai looked at the horse differently. They didn't see a meal, they saw a partner. The Burtai were likely the first to milk horses and, eventually, to throw a leg over their backs. This was the single most important moment in human history. The distance gap was closed. A man who could walk 15 miles a day could now cover 50. Information, trade, and culture began to move at the speed of a gallop. The world was suddenly a much smaller place. The transition from hunting horses to riding them wasn't a peaceful one. It was a brutal breaking of spirits. But a strange biological miracle occurred. The horse began to trust. Unlike the zebra, which is notoriously aggressive and untamable, the horse possessed a unique social structure that allowed it to accept a human as a lead mare. As the first nomadic tribe began to move, they realized that the horse gave them a terrifying advantage. If you were on a horse, you were a god among men. You were faster, taller, and stronger. The horse became the engine of empire. But as the Bronze Age dawned, the quiet relationship of the steppes was about to turn violent. The horse was no longer just a mode of transport. It was being bred into a weapon of mass destruction. Humans began to select for the biggest, the bravest, and the most aggressive. They created the war horse. In the coming centuries, these animals will be draped in bronze and steel, trained to bite, kick, and trample enemies on the command of their riders. The peaceful grazer of the plains was about to become the most feared sight on the battlefield. The bond was sealed in the dust of the steppes. But as the ancient world grew, the horse moved from the nomadic tents to the great palaces of Egypt and Mesopotamia. But they weren't being ridden yet. They were being harnessed to chariots. These were the tanks of the ancient world, and they were about to change the map of the planet forever. But even as the chariot dominated the plains, a new shadow was rising from the east, a group of riders who would perfect the art of horse archery and bring the greatest empires in history to their knees. The era of the cavalry was coming, and with it, a level of slaughter the world had never seen. While the heavy destriers of Europe were struggling under the weight of steel, a different kind of biological revolution was happening in the burning silence of the Arabian Peninsula. For thousands of years, the Bedouin tribes had been breeding a horse that was the complete opposite of the European tank. They needed a creature that could survive on a handful of dates, travel for days without water, and possess a burst of speed that could vanish like a mirage. This was the birth of the Arabian horse. Their anatomy is unique in the equine world. While most horses have 6 lumbar vertebrae, many Arabians have only 5. They have 1 less pair of ribs. This compact frame makes them incredibly agile, but their real secret is their respiratory system. They have huge, flared nostrils and a unique gibber or dish-shaped forehead that allows for massive oxygen intake. They aren't just horses. They are high-performance lungs on 4 legs. But the Bedouins didn't just breed for physical traits. They bred for asal, purity of blood and spirit. Because these horses lived inside the tents with the families to stay safe from the desert heat, they developed a psychological bond with humans that is deeper than any other breed. An Arabian horse doesn't just obey, it connects. In the late 17th and early 18th centuries, 3 of these desert kings were brought to England: the Dali Arabian, the Godolphin Arabian, and the Bailey Turk. When these refined, high-stamina desert stallions were bred with the sturdy English hunting mares, it created a biological explosion. This was the birth of the thoroughbred. The thoroughbred is the fastest land animal over a distance. They are the Ferraris of the animal kingdom. Every single thoroughbred racing today, from the Kentucky Derby to the Royal Ascot, can trace its DNA back to those 3 original stallions. But the price of this extreme speed is fragility. A thoroughbred's legs are incredibly thin for its body weight, carrying over 1,000 pounds of muscle and bones that are essentially ceramic tubes. When they gallop, the pressure on their lungs is so immense that they often boast tiny capillaries. They are built on the edge of physical possibility. As the 19th century progressed, these speed kings became the ultimate status symbol. Horse racing became the sport of kings, and the gambling industry turned the horse into a global currency. But while the elite were betting millions on the track, the common horse was facing a much grimmer reality. In the coal mines of England and the growing cities of America, the horse was being worked to death. They were the literal fuel of the Industrial Revolution. Thousands of pit ponies were born in total darkness underground and died there, never having seen a blade of grass. In the cities, streetcar horses lived an average of only 2 to 4 years because the work of pulling heavy iron cars over cobblestones was so brutal. The horse had built civilization, but now civilization was grinding the horse into the dust. Yet, just as it seemed the horse might become nothing more than a disposable tool, the world plunged into a conflict so vast and so violent that it would force humans to remember exactly why they had partnered with a horse in the first place. The steam engine and the car had arrived, but they were about to fail in the mud of the trenches. The horse was going back to War I last time. The world thought the age of the horse was over when the first cars rolled off the assembly line. They thought machines would replace muscle. But when the Great War broke out in 1914, the machines got stuck. The trucks broke down. The tanks sank into the waist-deep mud of Flanders. In the middle of the greatest slaughter in human history, the world realized it didn't need more steel. It needed more soul. Millions of horses were rounded up from farms, delivery routes, and hunting stables to be sent to the front lines. They were about to face mustard gas, machine guns, and a level of suffering that would change the human-horse bond forever. The world thought the age of the horse was over when the first cars rolled off the assembly line. They thought machines would replace muscle. But when the Great War broke out in 1914, the machines got stuck. The trucks broke down. The The tank sank into the waist-deep mud of Flanders. In the middle of the greatest slaughter in human history, the world realized it didn't need more steel. It needed more soul. Millions of horses were rounded up from farms, delivery routes, and hunting stables to be sent to the front lines. They were about to face mustard gas, machine guns, and a level of suffering that would change the human-horse bond forever. The scale of the mobilization was staggering. During the first year of the war alone, the British Army was purchasing 15,000 horses every day. These weren't bred for battle chargers. They were family pets and hard-working farm animals. They were taken from quiet pastures and thrust into a landscape of barbed wire and exploding shells. On the front lines, the horse became the literal lifeline for the soldiers. When the heavy rains turned the battlefields into a soup of thick, clay-like mud, the motorized vehicles became useless. It was the horse and the mule that hauled the heavy artillery into position. It was the horse that carried the food, the water, and the ammunition to the men in the trenches. Without them, the armies would have starved in a week. But the cost was horrific. Of the 1 million horses sent to the front by the British, only 62,000 returned. They weren't just killed by artillery. They died from exhaustion, skin diseases, and the freezing cold. Yet, amidst this carnage, a strange psychological phenomenon occurred. For the soldiers living in the hell of the trenches, the horse became a symbol of sanity. To see a living, breathing animal, something that reminded them of home and a world before the war, kept many men from losing their minds. They would share their meager rations with their mounts, grooming them even when they were too tired to eat themselves. It was a bond forged in the shadow of death, where the horse gave the soldier hope, and the soldier gave the horse a reason to keep walking through the mud. One of the most legendary figures from this era wasn't a general or a king, but a small mare named Sergeant Reckless. Though her story peaked during the Korean War, she represented the absolute pinnacle of the warhorse spirit. Reckless was a Mongolian mare who was trained to carry recoilless rifles and ammunition. She was so intelligent that she learned the supply routes after just a few trips. During the Battle of Outpost Vegas, she made 51 solo trips in a single day, carrying nearly 9,000 pounds of ammunition across open rice paddies while under heavy enemy fire. She shielded wounded soldiers and would crouch down when she heard the whistle of incoming mortars. She was promoted to the rank of Staff Sergeant, a title she wore with honor until her death. She was a reminder that even in the age of nuclear weapons, the courage of a horse remained unmatched. As the smoke cleared from the battlefields of the 20th century, the horse faced its most quiet, yet most dangerous transition. They were no longer needed for war. They were no longer needed for transport. They were no longer needed for agriculture. The world was moving toward a digital and mechanical future, and many predicted the horse would simply fade into the history books as a relic of past. But instead of disappearing, the horse moved into a new realm, the realm of the elite athlete and the spiritual healer. While the massive draft horses moved to specialized farms and parades, the world of competitive sport reached a level of perfection never seen before. The horse was no longer a tool. It was a luxury, a high-performance athlete, and for many, a gateway to a lost connection with nature. This transition led to the creation of the most expensive and genetically perfect animals on the planet. The war-torn fields were replaced by the manicured grass of the Olympic arenas and the high-stakes auction blocks of Kentucky. The horse had survived the era of blood and iron, only to enter the era of high finance and genetic engineering. But as we mastered their breeding and pushed their speed to the limit, we began to uncover a secret. Beyond the gold medals and the million-dollar price tags, the horse possessed a power we were only beginning to understand, a power not in their legs, but in their presence. Science was about to discover that a horse's heart could do much more than just pump blood. It could synchronize with the human spirit in a way that defied explanation. The war-torn fields were replaced by the manicured grass of the Olympic arenas and the high-stakes auction blocks of Kentucky. The horse had survived the era of blood and iron, only to enter the era of high finance and genetic engineering. But as we mastered their breeding and pushed their speed to the limit, we began to uncover a secret. Beyond the gold medals and the million-dollar price tags, the horse possessed a power we were only beginning to understand, a power not in their legs, but in their presence. Science was about to discover that a horse's heart could do much more than just pump blood. It could synchronize with the human spirit in a way that defied explanation. This transition into the modern era created a paradox. In the past, a horse was a necessity. Today, it is a choice. But that choice has led to the development of the most specialized breeds in history. Take the Aquatique, the golden horse of Turkmenistan. These animals are living relics of the ancient world, yet they look like they belong in a sci-fi movie. Their hair has a unique structure that refracts light, giving them a metallic, shimmering glow. They were bred for the harshness of the Karakum Desert, capable of going days without water, yet they possess an elegance that makes them the crown jewels of any stable. To own an akultik is not just to own a horse. It is to own a piece of living gold that was once the pride of Alexander the Great. As we move further into the 21st century, the value of these animals skyrocketed. In the world of thoroughbred racing and high-level show jumping, a single stallion can be valued at over $60 million. Their genetics are mapped, their diets are calculated by AI, and they travel the globe in custom-built Boeing 747s. We have pushed the physical limits of the horse to the absolute breaking point. But while the world was focused on how fast a horse could run or how high it could jump, a quieter revolution was happening in the field of psychology and medicine. Researchers began to notice something incredible when humans spent time around horses. It wasn't just that the people felt calmer. When a human stands within a few feet of a horse, their heart rates often begin to synchronize. A horse's heart is massive, and it creates an electromagnetic field much larger than a human's. In the presence of a horse, a person's blood pressure drops, and their levels of cortisol, the stress hormone, plummet. This led to the rise of equine-assisted therapy. Horses don't care about your social status, your bank account, or your past mistakes. They respond to your internal energy. They are biological mirrors. If you are anxious, the horse is anxious. If you are calm, the horse is calm. This unique ability has made horses the ultimate healers for veterans with PTSD, children with autism, and people struggling with deep emotional trauma. The animal that once carried us into the fire of battle is now the one leading us back to peace. We realize that the horse didn't just build our cities, it helped build our capacity for empathy. The horsepower of the future isn't measured in engines, it's measured in the profound, silent connection that happens when a 1,200-pound predator-prey animal chooses to trust a human. Yet, even as we celebrate these modern miracles, a dark shadow remains. For every million-dollar champion living in a climate-controlled stable, there are thousands of horses that are forgotten. The wild mustangs of the American West, the descendants of the Spanish explorers, are caught in a bitter struggle for land and survival. The greatest partner humanity ever had is now often seen as a nuisance in the very lands it helped settle. This conflict brings us to a final, haunting question about our future with this species. As the world becomes more digital and more disconnected from the earth, the horse stands as one of our last remaining links to the wild. We have used them, abused them, worshipped them, and abandoned them. But as we look toward a future where technology dominates every aspect of our lives, we are finding that the horse is more relevant than ever. In the final chapter of this saga, we look at the ultimate legacy of the horse. From the mysterious ghost elephants they help track in the deep forest to the final emotional reunion of a species that refuses to let us go. The story began in a jungle 55 million years ago, and it ends with a reflection in a horse's eye that tells us exactly who we are. As the world becomes more digital and more disconnected from the earth, the horse stands as one of our last remaining links to the wild. We have used them, abused them, worshipped them, and abandoned them. But as we look toward a future where technology dominates every aspect of our lives, we are finding that the horse is more relevant than ever. This final reflection brings us to the ultimate legacy of the horse. From the mysterious ghost elephants they help track in the deep forest to the final, emotional reunion of a species that refuses to let us go, the story that began in a jungle 55 million years ago ends with a reflection in a horse's eye that tells us exactly who we are. In these final years, we are witnessing the horse transition into its most sacred role yet, the guardian of the soul. While the industrial age saw them as replaceable motors, the modern age is rediscovering their ancient wisdom. In the dense, mist-covered Nisna forest of South Africa, it was a horse that allowed researchers like Gareth Patterson to move silently through the undergrowth, tracking the last surviving secret elephants. A motor would have scared them. A human on foot would have been a threat. But a horse? A horse is part of the forest's own heartbeat. This partnership allowed us to glimpse secrets of the natural world that science had long written off as extinct. But the legacy of the horse isn't just found in the wild. It is found in our very DNA. Recent studies have suggested that the domestication of the horse didn't just change our travel. It changed our language, our genes, and our social structures. We are centaur-like in our history, half human, half-horse and our achievements. Every city you walk through was built on the backs of these creatures. Every road was carved by their hooves. To forget the horse is to forget the foundation of our own house. Today, we face a choice. As we look at the remaining wild herds, from the Brumbies of Australia to the Mustangs of America, we are seeing the final remnants of a wild spirit. We often treat them as shadows of the past, but they are actually mirrors of our future. If there is no room left for the horse to run free, is there truly any room left for the wild parts of the human spirit? The horse reminds us that power without grace is just destruction, and that true strength lies in the ability to carry another's burden without losing your own soul. As this saga closes, we return to that image of the horse's eye, a large, dark orb that sees almost everything around it. In that reflection, you see 55 million years of survival. You see the tiny swamp creature, the chariot puller of Egypt, the wool-weary soldier of the trenches, and the golden stallion of the desert. But most importantly, you see yourself. The horse has been our mirror for 5 millennia. They have shown us our cruelty, our ambition, and our capacity for love. The story of the horse is not over. It is simply changing. As long as there is a trail to follow or a heart that needs healing, the horse will be there. They have finished pulling our plows and carrying our knights, but their most important journey, carrying our spirits back to nature, is just beginning. They are the silent titans of our history, the accidental survivors who chose to walk beside us, and the only creatures that can truly make us feel like we are flying while our feet are still on the ground. If this journey through the 55 million year legacy of the horse moved you, consider what we owe to the creatures that built our world. Please like, subscribe, and share this story to ensure the legend of the horse is never forgotten.